All right, you guys, let's go ahead and add some contents to this bottle. So it appears like there's some sort of a gold liquid inside it. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to fill our bottle. So I'm going to go ahead and select our shape down here, this gray one. That's the shape of our bottle. I'm going to add a new layer above it. So it's going to be underneath my highlight layers. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my eyedropper tool and select this yellow here. Now, if you don't have this image, you can go ahead and look at this number right here to get the exact color that I'm using, or you can just look here and see about where my color is. So it's pretty saturated. We're going to go ahead and select that. Then we're going to go ahead and fill this in. Next, we're going to go ahead and unselect out of this. Then using my lasso tool, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line of where I want the edge of my liquid to be. So I'm going to put it somewhere about there. Now the quicker you can draw that line, the smoother it's going to be. If you go really slowly, it's going to get all jaggedy, so just try to quickly go across. If you can't get it right the first time, just keep trying, and eventually you'll get the right shape that you want. Now that we have the shape selected, let's go ahead and hit delete, and now that gets rid of that top area. Next, let's go ahead and add this top surface to our liquid. So I'm going to add a new layer for it, then using my circular marquee tool, I'm going to go ahead and make an oval that's about the same size as my bottle. I want it to be a little bit bigger. Then I'm going to go ahead and select this color right here that makes up the top surface. Let's see what color that is. There's its color right there. There's its position right over here towards the white. Then we'll fill that in. Next, let's go ahead and turn on the transform tool and then turn on the warp tool. This way we can customly make the surface of our liquid. So I'm going to drag this over to the edge of my bottle there, and this over to the edge of my bottle there. Then I'm going to go ahead and start morphing the shape. Now you don't have to copy their bottle exactly. You can make the liquid whatever color you want. You can make it in whatever shape you want. You don't even have to put liquid in it. You can put anything you want into this bottle. The concept that I teach you on how to create the glass part of it will allow you to create a bottle for anything and then allow you to add anything into it. All right, great. Let's go ahead and hit enter. Perfect, looks good. Now it's hanging over a little bit on this side, so I'm gonna use my eraser and erase that away. And I can also kind of see through the white part of my bottle right here. So what I wanna do is I wanna come back up to my white highlight layer. Then I'm going to select the shape again so that I can't paint outside of it. And then coming back to the color white, I'm going to go ahead and paint in around these edges once more. I'm going to bring my brush opacity up to 50%. And now you'll see it covers that all up. Now we want to make sure these edges are really white, at least in most of the areas. Any place where it's supposed to be white, we want it to be white, which means you can't see through it. You'll see as I fill this edge in right here, it's going to cover that up. And that's exactly what we want. Perfect. Now the surface shape up here is looking a little bit boring, so I'm going to come back down to that layer. And then using my lasso tool, I can go ahead and draw like that, and then go ahead and hit delete to sort of make it look a little bit more interesting. Same with this side. So I can go like that, come back, and delete. See how that looks. Awesome. I'm gonna erase this away a little bit. Next, let's go ahead and add a top glow to this surface. Because it's gold, I think it should be glowing just a little bit. The way we're gonna do that is by coming over to its layer, selecting it, and then coming down to effects, and then coming over to outer glow. Now you see we can create an outer glow on that, and it makes it look a lot more interesting. So we're going to select an orange like we have right now. We might make it a little bit more orange. That looks good. And then we're going to bring the opacity down just a little bit to about 75%. Then my size is at 43 pixels, and this is just the distance it's going to throw that glow. So you'll see if we bring it down to 0 pixels, you can't see it at all. And as you bring it up, it gets bigger and bigger. So I'm going to make mine pretty large, probably about 100 pixels. And we'll go ahead and hit OK. Great. Next, what we want to do is, if we look at this bottle, there's sort of these little glowing orbs inside of it. So let's create those. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my brush tool, and then I want to make sure I'm on a soft edged brush. So I'm going to come up here to my soft edged brush, and then using my color white and bringing my brush opacity all the way up to 100%, I'm going to go ahead and make a dot like so. And you'll see, because we're still on this layer that has the glow effect on it, it automatically applies that to it. So I can add another one here, and we get that really cool glowing effect. Next, we're going to go ahead and add some shading to our liquid. So I'm going to select my liquid color, and then I'm going to darken that a little bit to about there, and come a little bit more down into the oranges. I'll hit OK. And now I'm going to select my bottle shape so I don't paint outside of it. And then I'm going to add a new layer above my content layer. And then we can go ahead and start painting that in. I'm going to bring my brush opacity down to 2%. And we can start painting in like so. And where we want to paint in is just along this edge over here, and also a little bit on this edge. We don't want to paint too much, but just enough to look a little bit more realistic and add a little bit more shadow to it. We also want this right here to stand out a lot more, this reflection, and so by putting this darker color behind it, it really does that for us. Alright, that brings us to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, you learned how to add the liquid contents of your potion. You also learned how to create this really cool glow effect, and then you learned how to add a little bit of shadow to your liquid. Thanks for watching this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Alright, in this lecture, we're going to go ahead and add in these light refractions onto our bottle. So if we look at our reference over here, you see this blue and dark gray area on the bottle. What that is that's light being refracted into the glass and around the bottle. So let's go ahead and paint that in. First, we want to add a new layer that's underneath our highlight layer, but above our liquid contents layer. So the layer we're on right now has that shadow, and that's the very top layer of our liquid contents. And the next one is our glass highlight, so we're going to add a layer right in between those. Next, we're going to go ahead and select this blue in here. That's its color right there. So it's almost an aqua green. Then we're going to go ahead and start painting in. So using my brush with a soft edge and bringing my brush opacity down to about 2%, we're going to go ahead and start painting in any areas that we see that should be blue. Now you're going to have this blue area anywhere where the glass is really close to each other and you can see the glass on the other side. So for example, right here, when you look at this glass, the glass on the other side of it is really close to it, and so it's going to create that blueness. Same with over here, but you're seeing the blue part because there's also glass as it curves around right on the other side. So you're seeing two layers of glass, and that's what's creating the blue. So we'll go ahead and keep filling this in. Great. So once we have our soft layer in, now we can go ahead and shrink our brush size down a little bit more and bring our brush opacity up to 4%. We can go ahead and really start adding that in. And always remember, you can always take away and add more, so don't be too worried about messing things up. So here's a really good example of where I went a little too much. Over here, there's not really much blue, so I can go ahead and take my erase tool and erase that away. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and grab a little bit lighter version of this. So we'll come up like so, and I'm going to come a little bit more towards my blues, so somewhere about there. We're going to go ahead and add a little bit of this in just to make it a little bit more interesting, so it's not just one color of blue. And I'll bring my brush opacity down back to 20%. Now I'm kind of losing my curve right here, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my erase tool again and go ahead and erase a little bit of that away until I start to introduce that curve back in. And I also want to thin it out a little bit. It's starting to get too wide and I want it to be thinner. Great. Now I want to introduce a little bit darker of a color. So you see in here we got a little bit more darker of a blue. So I'm going to select this color down here and then I'm going to darken that. So I'll bring that down to about there. And using my brush tool, I'm going to go ahead and start painting that darker color in, like so. And I'm still at 20% opacity, so I can really start layering this in. Now that's still not dark enough for me, so I'm going to go ahead and select an even darker version of that and paint a little bit of that in. I'm going to add a little bit of this on this edge also, like so, and then a little bit over here too. Now I'm noticing up here at the top of my bottle, it's a little bit more blue than aqua, so I'm going to go ahead and select my mid color, and then I'm going to select a more blue version of that. So I'll come up to about there and maybe make it a little bit more saturated, and then I can go ahead and start painting that in. Now I'm noticing that down here at the bottom, we're kind of losing this edge on our bottle. So I'm going to switch back up to my highlight layer, and then using my erase tool, I'm going to go ahead and sort of erase that back in. And lastly, I want to introduce a little bit more of an aqua color down here. So I'm going to switch back down to my blue layer. And then I'm going to grab more of an aqua color, and I want it to be pretty saturated and pretty bright, so probably about there. Then I'm going to go ahead and paint that in this area, like so. And that just introduces a little bit more of an interesting color in there. I'm also noticing along the bottom of this edge of our stand, there's not really any highlight, so I'm going to come back up to my highlight layer. Then using my erase tool, I'll go ahead and erase away this bottom area and expose the dark area. Now, lastly, we want to add a nice white haze to our bottle, because when you look at glass, it tends to make things a little bit lighter when you look through them. And in areas like this right here and this right here, it's going to be completely transparent, which will be unnatural. So let's go ahead and add a new layer, and we're going to add this below our blue layer. So that way our white haze doesn't cover any of this blue, but we want it to cover this transparent area and also some of this yellow liquid. So we're going to go ahead and select our bottle shape, and then we're going to fill that in with the color white. Next, we're going to go ahead and bring that opacity down. We're going to bring it down really low, probably to about 5%. Perfect. So now that just adds the extra haze. So if I turn that layer off, you see there's a tiny little difference. Now, lastly, what I want to do is I want to add a new layer above this, and using my brush tool and making sure I'm on a soft edged brush, and I'm going to bring the brush size up quite a bit. I'm going to add one big highlight right here, like so. And I have my brush opacity down to 20%, so it just barely adds it in. Alright, that brings us to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, you learned how to add this blue area in that makes your glass look a lot more realistic. And all it is it's just a refraction of the image that's coming from behind it, and it's traveling through the glass and coming out the other side. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to go ahead and add in that cork. So I'm going to add a new layer above all of my layers. And the way we're going to create this cork is first, we're going to go ahead and just select our cork color off of our cork reference. There's its color right there. It's in that position. Hit OK. Then just using a hard-edged brush, we're just going to go ahead and paint in a basic cork shape. Don't worry if this isn't perfect, we can go ahead and erase away to create the exact shape that we want. So something about like so. Make sure you get that rounded bottom. Next, we're going to go ahead and erase away these edges to get the shape we want. So just like so. Perfect. Now we're going to go ahead and achieve this rounded top. So the way we're going to do that is by using our circular marquee tool. And then we're going to make a selection that's about the size and width of our cork. And then we want to get the right angle in there. So the angle would be how squashed your circle is. So something about like that should be good. Then we're going to invert the selection by hitting Control-Shift-I or Command-Shift-I. So now what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to erase this edge away and leave the middle the same. Let's do this once more, but down here. Down here we're going to have a little bit more of a rounded curve, so we can bring our circle down a little bit more. So about there should be good. Then we'll get that all lined up like so. Then we'll hit Control-Shift-I to invert it and erase away this edge. Perfect. See how that looks? Awesome. Now I'm going to nudge it over just a little bit with my arrow keys and maybe down a little bit. So about there. Perfect. I'm also going to erase away these little edges that we missed. Great. Next, let's go ahead and select the shape of our layer. And then we're going to add a new layer above that. And then let's select this color over here that they're using for their highlight. So it's just a lighter brown. There's the color number right there. There's its position. And then using my brush tool and making sure I'm on a soft edged brush, we can go ahead and start painting in those highlights. I'm going to bring my brush opacity down to 20%. And first we're just going to paint in the basic shape of those highlights. So something like so. Then I'm going to bring my brush size down. And now we're really going to start getting into the real detail of it. So basically we're getting the highlight on this edge because the light source is coming from over here, and we're also getting the light source coming from somewhere over here, and so it's hitting this surface. Great. Next, let's go ahead and grab an even lighter highlight color. So we're going to come up to about there and come into our yellows. So about there should be good. And then we'll go ahead and add our second layer of highlight. You'll notice here that I'm kind of doing little small strokes. That's to add some texture to make it look more interesting. And then we can follow this edge with our highlight. Same with this back edge over here. Perfect. Now let's grab one more highlight color, and we're going to make this one a little bit brighter and a little bit more yellow. Then we can start painting in this highlight. Now I'm going to go ahead and select out of here, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint over this a little bit more just to make it look a little bit more hand painted. So I'm going to select colors in here, so that color right there, and switching over to my brush tool and bringing my brush opacity up to 100%. I'm going to go ahead and paint along that edge like so. Same with there. And so I'm just going to keep selecting my colors and then painting with them. By the way, if you hold down I to switch over to your eyedropper tool, and then you select your color and then let go, that will allow you to switch back over to your brush tool really quickly. Rather than having to switch between the two of them manually, you can just keep holding down I, select your color, and let go. Just make sure you don't just press the I, because that's going to select your eyedropper and keep it on your eyedropper. Great. Next, what I want to do is I want to paint a little bit over this edge right here because it doesn't really look like it's going into the glass. So I'm going to select the color we have around here, and I'm going to go ahead and sort of paint that in by hand. And then I'm going to select this even lighter white color. I'm going to paint a little bit more highlight in. Now, I know I'm not on my highlight layer right now, but that's okay because we're about to merge this all together, so it's one layer. I'm going to select a little bit darker version of that, but still pretty light, and I'll add it right around this edge. I went a little bit too much over the edge here, so I'll just go ahead and paint some of that back in. Perfect. Let's go ahead and zoom out and see how that looks. Awesome. Now we can go ahead and turn off our background shape. So this first shape that we made, we can go ahead and turn that off and see how it looks now. So you can see how we can see through the bottle and see this gray background. That's really nice, and it's going to make your bottle look a lot more realistic in your game. Now let's go ahead and merge all these layers together, but before we do that, we want to select them all, and then we're going to make a copy, and then we can merge those layers together. Then we'll take the rest of these layers, select them, and put them into a folder so we still have those. Also, now that this layer is merged, you'll see here on this edge where we had the glowing effect on our gold part, it kind of came out outside of our bottle, and since it's an effect, you can't really cut it off. And so now that it's one layer and rasterized, we can go ahead and erase that away with our erase tool as best as possible. And you can get in there really close if you'd like and get it really well, but I don't think most people are really going to notice that. Perfect. Now, I'm really curious to know what this looks like in the world of Rayman. So let's go ahead and bring in a background and see how it looks. So I have this background from Rayman. I'm going to go ahead and drag this layer by clicking it and dragging it into my Rayman background, like so. And then we can shrink that down. See how that looks. So let's say that was a potion in the corner just saying you have 10 potions or whatever. It looks pretty good. It fits right in there. Alright, now how do you save this out so it has a transparent background and it's not a PSD file? Because you can't use PSD files in your game. Well, let's come back into our document and let's go ahead and turn off this background layer and turn off this reference image. Then we're going to come up to File, Save As, And we're going to change this from a Photoshop document to a PNG document. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to save out with transparent backgrounds. So let's go ahead and hit save. So now we have that. Perfect. Your assignment for this lecture is to create this project if you haven't already. Once you create it, I want you to apply it to a game background. So it can be a background that you've already created, or it can be a background of a game that's already out there. Once you've done that, go ahead and post it to the Q&A section of the course, and I can't wait to see your work. Thanks for watching this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you in the next